Welcome to Ask Psych Sessions, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you would like to submit a question, please go to bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All lowercase, all one word. And here's our next question. We had such a positive response to our mini-series on online teaching a few months back that we wanted to follow up with a series of what it was like to go online or to do remote teaching for people who had never done it before. Marianne Lloyd had this great idea, and we thought it was worth pursuing. So, special thanks to Marianne, who went and found 6 of the best teachers we know to see what this transition was like for them. And this will be brought to you over 3 weeks, 6 episodes, 6 interviews. Here we go. Enjoy Ask Psych Sessions with Marianne Lloyd.
Thanks for joining us again. Today we're continuing our discussion with people that were new to remote or distance or online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our next guest is Lindsay Masland, who is a professor at Appalachian State University. Thanks for joining us today, Lindsay.
Sure, happy to be here.
So I think what might help before we jump in for your evaluation of how things went is just to give our listeners a sense about what you were teaching, about how many students were in your courses, and maybe just a little bit of background about what kind of students and institution you're working for.
Sure. So this spring semester, I had 4 courses. We usually have a 3-3 load, but because of the different courses I teach, mine doesn't end up balanced in that way. So of course, I had my biggest load this semester that this happened. And so although it was 4 classes, 2 of those were the same course. So I had one 50-student section of educational psychology and then a second 50-student section. And that had been, face-to-face. So they'd all been face-to-face beforehand. And those are actually education majors, not psychology majors. It's the one psychology course that is required of all education majors to take. And so that would, so I had those 2 undergrad courses, so 100 across that. And then I had 2 graduate courses. I had one 9-person service learning stats class, which got interesting. And then I had one 13-person teaching of psychology class. It's a graduate class for students who are either interested in becoming graduate teaching assistants in our psychology department or who already have a position and are continuing to receive supervision. So those are my 4 classes. And then in terms of the institution, so App State is part of the University of North Carolina University System. So it is a state school, and we think of ourselves as a master's comprehensive university. Our goal is to have 20,000 students by 2020. We'll see if that actually happens. So we're, not too far off from that right now in terms of size. We do have a couple of doctoral programs, but we have a PsyD, and then there's a EDD over in the College of Education. But other than that, primarily undergrad and master's level.
Right, thanks. And so those graduate students, what program are they in? The PsyD program, a variety of programs?
Yeah, so we have in our psychology department, we have one PsyD in clinical, and then we have 3 other master's level programs. We have an IO master's, we have a general experimental master's, and then we have a combined master's specialist program in school psychology, which is the entry level degree required to practice as a school psychologist. So out of those, the grad students in my applied statistics class were all from our school psychology program. And then the ones who were, training to become GTAs, they were mixed across our IO program and our experimental program. So actually none of them were PsyD students. Our PsyD is brand new this year. And so they are not at the point, that cohort is not at the point where they could, start thinking about having GTA positions and stuff.
Got it. Thank you. So let's maybe start with, and you can choose if you want to talk about some of your courses or leave some aside, kind of what did you feel like went really well by pandemic standards after you made this switch? Anything you feel like?
I love that label, by pandemic standards. I feel like that's going to be a new phrase in our lexicon, even once we're beyond this. So, I mean, it was kind of interesting, the whole thing. So I have been teaching, if you include my graduate teaching, 10 years. So I'm not new to teaching, but I'm also not a veteran like we have so many veterans of in our Society for Teaching of Psychology that certainly know more than me. But interestingly, I hadn't done any online teaching at all. And that wasn't because I was necessarily against it or anything like that, but my department kind of had a philosophical stance against it. And so we really only taught online courses in emergency situations. So the opportunity had never presented itself. That being said, though, over time, I have put a lot of things online in terms of students turning in assignments, where they would access resources. And I wasn't doing that because I was envisioning someday needing to be online. It wasn't even about the online. I had done all that because I was trying to teach in an evidence-based way and trying to teach in an inclusive way. And so I was trying to meet the needs of a diverse array of my students, even in the face-to-face modality already. So it wasn't super hard for me to transition in some ways. In terms of like specific successes, one example would be from my undergrad educational psychology class, the one that I had 100 in. That's a little daunting to all of a sudden have that be online. But what I ended up doing is, at the time that we got the notification that we were going to be all online, I had 17 course meetings left. And because it was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. And so I was kind of thinking, all right, how can I cut things out but still have some course meetings? Because I surveyed my students and a lot of them still wanted a synchronous option. So what I decided to do was to offer synchronous options on Mondays and Wednesdays. There were 12 Mondays and Wednesdays left. And then I would record those and then upload them to YouTube. So that would be available, but not required. And then I pulled together a bunch of resources that I honestly already had on our website, just because I was trying to teach kind of from a universal design perspective a little bit. And I just pulled together a bunch of static resources, obviously the textbook chapters, but other things they could read or view. And then I kind of just set it up so that as a student, they would pick from a menu of things to do any given week. And then they had certain things that were due every Sunday. And so that seemed to work really well because students were able to choose whether or not any aspect of their learning was synchronous for the entire remaining, kind of 6 weeks that we had. And then those who did want to be there and asking questions and talking and stuff like that, they could. But I was essentially just lecturing because I didn't want to do a bunch of group activities that a bunch of people were going to miss out on. The students, I guess, really wanted to continue to hear me lecture through Zoom. So that's what I did. So that works. The other thing that was cool is I got rid of a huge culminating project that I typically have in that course. I was just trying to envision some of my students being stressed out in their homes and having to share computers and having to assist with their younger siblings homeschooling and how they would be able to kind of summon the brain power to do some kind of deep dive independent project. So what I did is I broke that project up into 4 parts and turned it into group work, which I know is a little bit of a risk because sometimes, students hate group work and I didn't previously have group work. But so then they were kind of doing this kind of hard work together and they could do it synchronously or asynchronously or whatever. I just had periodic due dates for the 4 different parts. And that actually worked really well. And I think the quality of the work across the board was better than if I had them do it as independent projects. Now, some of the independent projects would have been rock star and would have been better than the group work that was turned in. But I feel like, what is that thing they say? Rising tide lifts all boats or something like that. Like that's kind of what seemed to happen. So I might actually keep that in face-to-face iterations in the future. We might just do the group work actually in class. So I'd say that worked really well.
But you didn't talk about the downside, which is fewer things to grade. That's as soon as you have, instead of 100, how many did you have? And what did you do with all that found time?
It was, well, so, and I you know what I should have done? being a psychologist. I should have actually measured the amount of time it took to do the grading. Because so I went from 100 students to, it was probably about 27 groups. It was 25 groups or 24 groups. And then there were 3 students who asked if they could not work in groups. And I gave them that option, by the way. I said, I think you'll probably get stronger scores if you work in a group, just based on the way that group work seems to work out. But they really wanted to work on their own, and that was fine. Yeah. So it cut down from 100 to 27. And that was great. So that's the other thing. Now it was a more spread out grading too, because it used to be about 3 weeks before the end of the semester or 2 weeks before the end of the semester, this huge project would be due. And so I would give myself and my TA, I do have a TA, 10 days to grade the 100. But this time it was something that was due, like every other week. And so it really spread it out. So I had to grade 27 things 4 times. So I guess it's still about 100 gradings, but it was way easier cognitively from my end to kind of summon the brain power needed to just do 27 every 2 weeks. So yeah, that was a great thing that came out of this.
That's excellent. That is, and I always, I keep seeing those lists of things that ability to work in groups and work collaboratively really is a high value for the, future employers, for all of our workplace graduates. So I think in that sense, in addition to making your brain power during this time a little less taxed, I think that's a great experience for the students too. So that is a big win.
Sure.
Do you have, hopefully not as equally strong of something that did not go well? Hopefully you don't have an equally...
I am somebody who, I am such an optimist that I have to work really hard to think of things that didn't go well. That doesn't mean things didn't go well. They did. I have a big positivity bias in my teaching. And so that's hard. Let me think here. Okay, so this was one. Oh, yes, I do. Okay, so in the graduate service learning statistics class. Okay, so what that class is, they're future school psychologists, and they need to learn how to utilize data to help their future schools make decisions about what interventions are working in the classroom, or make decisions about whether or not, an after school program is producing movement on the metrics the school cares about, those kinds of things. So a few years ago, I shifted that course from being, mostly kind of book focused to being service learning. Fortunately, we could still do the service learning stuff because it wasn't a face-to-face service learning. It just meant us getting data from a local school, analyzing it, and then doing a presentation and a full report for them. So we could still do that part, but here was the tough part. That whole course before this was taught in SPSS. And that was mostly, honestly, because of my background and because I just hadn't found a chunk of time in my, professional life to teach myself Jamovi or JASP yet. And it was one of those things where I was like, I'm going to do that someday. And it was a plan, but it was not a plan yet. And so it all of a sudden became an immediate plan. I had to learn. I ended up picking Jamovi after asking a bunch of people on the STP Facebook page, as well as stats people on Twitter, and ended up going with Jamovi. But I had never done that before. So I had to teach myself Jamovi at the same time as trying to teach in this new weird way. And luckily we didn't have a ton of the quantitative analyses left. A year ago, I switched because I teach both quantitative and qualitative analysis in this course because they are going into schools and both of those are helpful. I used to do qualitative first and quantitative second, but thank goodness I switched because it meant that we had done a lot of this stuff already in SPSS, but we still had ANOVA to work through, and some chi-square, which chi-square, is honestly easier done by hand, I think, than trying to make ANOVA do it for you. Trying to make SPSS do it for you. So we still had to do those. And so I was basically in this position where I was having to teach myself all the clicks and everything the day before I was going to go do it in a synchronous Zoom. And there was one day when we are all sitting there, and I know my students are sitting there in the Zoom room. They've got their Jamovis up and stuff. And I think I was trying to get an effect size or something like that out of one of the analyses, and I could not find it. And I literally spent 10 minutes live, like synchronous teaching, opening up. I know it's horrible, like opening the Jamovi textbook. I'm like, 1 minute, y'all. And then, of course, one of my grad students was like, I figured it out. This is what you do. So I was like, well, let's let so-and-so screen share and they will teach us how to calculate the effect size. And I was like, you're welcome. I hope you feel like you got your money's worth out of that today. So that was definitely the drawback, because I was just like, wow. But even with that, there's even like, a rainbow out of that rainstorm, is that it forced me to get familiar with Jamovi, forced me to do a thing that I was already planning on doing, and it just forced my hand. And now I can move forward in future iterations of the course, which will be face-to-face. It'll go back. But we're going to do Jamovi now. Yeah, because the benefit of that is obviously it's free. And when they are school psychologists in school systems and they do not have access to SPSS, because you know that regular K-12 school systems, why would they have SPSS? But my students will always have access to Jamovi. So even that kind of totally embarrassing thing had a good outcome.
And I share your optimistic perspective, so I can completely relate. And I think as someone that also, I switched my grad course into Jamovi for cost saving reasons, and because thankfully another colleague took on learning R. That's the real dream version of myself. We'll learn that soon. Just to give them another, I know, another platform. It's also I find a reminder when I have to do things like that of what it feels like for the students that are seeing this for the first time. And I tell them, like, the t-test makes such deep, transparent sense to me that it's very hard for me to think about when I didn't know what the t-test was. So having to go back and learn that platform probably was also really good for, I don't know, maybe you regularly teach yourself brand new things to stay fresh, but I do not.
No, and definitely. And then there was just the added pressure because I was also recording the Zoom, because I was like, well, here's another benefit of us being online is that if you are confused about something when you go to kind of do your homework, whatever, you can just rewatch the Zoom. And I'm like in my head thinking, this is going to be on YouTube. Me looking like an idiot for like 10, it probably wasn't literally 10 minutes, but it felt like 10 minutes. I was just like, okay, great. But I totally agree. Yeah. And of course, what a great lesson too, that like it was the students who taught me the thing, which that is what's supposed to be happening in classrooms too. And so, I think it was a good moment all around for us to kind of be supportive of each other in these tough times and to help each other learn something new.
I mean, engagement, humility.
Yeah.
I could always, you could, if you have a child at home, you can always lie and be like, oh, kid emergency, hang on. And then just shut off the camera and frantically Google, right? But sort of showing that ability to be human, I do think is a deeply important modeling for students. So it sounds like you've added 1,000.
I don't know about that, but I tried. I mean, one thing I will say that also has been interesting, and I'm trying to figure out what this is about. So my semester is done as of this point. I mean, it's technically finals right now, but I finished everything, all of my stuff. So I'm done with the semester. And so usually at the end of the semester, I'll have, 1 or 2 students sending me some kind of nice email, saying nice things about my teaching or something like that. And that's nice and that's good. So this semester, though, it's been way more. And I'm trying to figure out what that's about. I need more data points because it either is that this whole situation has made us, I think, more attuned to gratitude and feeling the need to say things when you think them instead of holding them in. So that's one thing that maybe students have always had some nice feelings, but maybe not thought that they should share them. And now people are doing that, which is great because I know I'm trying to do that more, telling people exactly what I'm saying, even though I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I should say this. Or does it mean that a lot of their other remote emergency teaching experiences or learning experiences have not been good. And so it's creating a contrast effect. I don't know. I'm just wondering. So it is nice that I'm getting all these emails, but then it also in the back of my head, I'm like, why are we getting these emails? Do a lot of professors need a lot of support, or is it just that students are, really wearing their hearts on their sleeve now? I don't know if you have any insight to that.
I live in the same little bit of concern, right? That hopefully it's just that I use those socio-emotional learning exercises that STP has posted, and the last one that students do is write a letter of gratitude, right? And the students say like, oh, this was such an amazing experience. So, I want to hope that it's just that stuff sort of working, but, I've met faculty members that I think might not have transitioned, is that, that their sort of response to this has been to clamp down, or, you'll see. That's the danger with Facebook groups, right? Someone reporting that the faculty member's like, oh, someone died. Well, this class will be a nice distraction. And that's a little just not my thought.
I know, it's so hard because I'm an associate professor in the psych department, but then the other half of my job is I'm assistant director of a center of teaching and learning. So I'm doing all this, faculty development work and the workshops that people would come to then be able to learn how to enhance their teaching. And it's interesting. Yeah. Like the things you see on the Facebook groups and other social media, seems like a big chunk of professors' concerns right now are about like controlling their students, or it's starting to expose like these kind of interesting power dynamics in our job. And like, what is it that we're supposed to be doing here? Are we supposed to be controlling things so much so that like we feel like that the students' work is their own work and that's the most important piece? Or is it this other more human side to our work? And so that's another thing that I wouldn't say is necessarily good, but it's really interesting. It's drawing some real bright lines, I think, around how people think about their jobs and about what's supposed to happen in a classroom, virtual or otherwise, and what the level of control should be and what the level of input from the student should be. It's really kind of bringing into clear relief some of those issues for me, for sure.
And probably worthy of a lot further dialogue.
Yes.
Too. I often wonder, it's like, are people even aware that that's what's going on? And if you're not aware, how do you get people in the room to kind of think about those things? Like I can recognize in my own, I'm finishing my 14th year, how much I've decreased my interest in control and increased in my interest in the human side. So I think those are good questions.
And the thing that I always think about in my faculty development work is that I think there are very few professors out there that are making quote unquote bad teaching choices out of intention, right? I think it's an ignorance thing. And I don't mean that in the, kind of laden way that word is used, but just it truly, like, when you know better, you do better. And so I think a lot of people are just replicating things that they've done, or they've just kind of fallen into these habits without subjecting their choices to a lot of deep scrutiny. And I think once they start to do that, then it unravels and they're like, wait, no, I don't love this job because I like to tell people what to do. And so I think that's another bright side of this. And that's the kind of the secret discussions that are happening, I think, in a lot of centers for teaching and learning, are like, this could be the moment, you guys, this could be the moment when people deeply consider, like, what is it we're doing in this career? Exactly what are you hoping your students take from this learning experience? And are you crafting your classroom, virtual or otherwise, to make sure that really happens? So I think there's a lot of great potential right now.
I can't think of a better way to end than on such a positive, optimistic note. I agree. Maybe I should cancel my fall sabbatical to jump back in. It might be rash. I could actually use my sabbatical to think about these things.
Yeah, lucky you.
I know. I do feel deep luck and gratitude.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. This was really great to chat, and I hope that at a teaching conference soon in the future we can continue these conversations in person. But I thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.